"Help me, brother," I whispered, as I stumbled to my brother's place in the dead of a freezing winter night. My clothes were tattered, and I cradled a baby in my arms. My brother's face went pale at the sight of me, frail, disheveled, clad only in a ragged shirt and barefoot. "What on earth happened?" he exclaimed, quickly ushering me inside and warming up the room. The baby, wrapped snugly in my jacket, slept soundly, but it couldn't stop shivering. "Who did this to you, my precious little sister?" my brother muttered through clenched teeth. "Lily, it's going to be okay now." Upon hearing his gentle voice, a wave of relief washed over me, and it felt as if all my strength had drained away. "My name is Lily. I'm a 27-year-old homemaker with a young son. I used to be a nurse, but I left my job when Terry, the son of the hospital director where I worked, proposed to me. I was drawn to Terry's kindness and his efficient work style. I have a brother, Derek, who is 5 years older than me. Our family consists of Derek and our grandparents since our parents died in a car accident when I was 4 and Derek was in 3rd grade. A truck driver, who had fallen asleep at the wheel, collided head-on with their car. My mother, a nurse, had been working late, and the accident happened when my father went to pick her up. Derek often recalls our father's last words before leaving that night. "Derek, I'm counting on you to take care of Lily." What might have been a casual request turned into a lifelong commitment for my brother. He has never let me down, always protecting me like a superhero. After the accident, it seemed we would be sent to separate foster homes, but our paternal grandparents, with whom we had little contact before, stepped in to take us. Our grandfather, with his white hair and long bushy beard, looked just like Santa Claus. When he first saw Derek, he muttered, "You're the spitting image of your father," and I believe I saw tears in his eyes. Our grandmother, a kind woman, hugged me tightly and sobbed, "Poor child." Later, I learned that our father had a falling out with our grandfather and left home, seeking freedom instead of continuing the family business. This led to a long estrangement, but our grandparents took us in despite the past. We moved to their home nestled in the rural mountains. Our grandfather, a renowned potter whose works fetched thousands of dollars, and our grandmother, whose kindness knew no bounds, raised us without financial difficulties. Under their care, Derek and I grew up happily. Derek went off to a prestigious university in the city, while I attended nursing school. We both pursued our dreams until our grandmother's health began to decline. Derek, who had been working in the city, returned home to help care for her. I wanted to return home too, but since I was still a student, Derek advised against it. Derek had always been interested in our grandfather's work, but our grandfather had firmly encouraged him to follow his own path, which led Derek to attend university. I believe our grandfather regretted forcing our father to continue the family business and didn't want his grandchildren to go through the same experience. However, Derek insisted on learning pottery from our grandfather. He had always been handy and pottery suited him well. Besides, Derek excelled in everything: academics, sports, and he was popular among his friends. He was truly a superhero. While taking care of our sick grandmother, Derek also learned the trade from our grandfather. After I graduated from nursing school, I started working as a nurse. It was then that Terry proposed to me and we got married. Our wedding was grand, and the joyous smiles of Derek and our grandfather are what I remember most. Derek brought pictures of our parents to the wedding. "We all just want you to be happy, Lily, including our late mom and dad," he said, shedding tears openly. Our grandmother, too ill to attend, cried tears of joy when she saw the video of the ceremony. I was truly blessed with a great family. I quit my job as a nurse, moved into Terry's family home, and began to support him as a full-time homemaker. We had a child, and my husband was kind. We were living a happy life. Until then, my life had seemed to be smooth sailing. I couldn't even imagine the hellish days that were to come. Not long after, my grandmother passed away. Terry attended the funeral with me and comforted me. My grandfather's disappointment was severe. I couldn't find the words to speak to him. While I was busy supporting our grandfather, my brother Derek delved deeper into his pottery. Half a year had passed when I found myself fleeing to Derek's place in the middle of a freezing winter night, wearing nothing but ragged clothes, holding a baby in my arms. As Derek beheld my drastically changed appearance, he was rendered speechless. I stood there, so thin and weak, clad only in a tattered shirt, barefoot. "What on earth happened?" he finally managed to say, ushering me inside and warming up the room. The baby, wrapped in my coat, slept soundly, but I couldn't shake off the shivers that racked my body. "Who did this to my dear sister?" Derek muttered through clenched teeth. A wave of relief washed over me upon hearing his voice, as if all strength had drained from my body. I didn't want to burden Derek or our grandfather, but I had no choice. I had to tell them. I began to recount the events at my in-laws' house. Terry and I had been living together, but due to my in-laws' insistence that I rest during and after pregnancy, we moved in with them. My in-laws, both remarried, welcomed us warmly. My father-in-law's kindness was particularly touching, as I had no father of my own. However, my mother-in-law seemed to harbor resentment. "You're flirting with my husband, aren't you, you disgusting woman?" she accused, launching into a campaign of verbal and physical abuse. She disparaged my upbringing, asserting that I could never blend in with their family's affluent background. As if that weren't enough, I found myself facing additional challenges due to a shortage of staff at the hospital. As a former nurse, I often found myself called in to assist at the hospital alongside my husband, Terry. However, during this time, I noticed something deeply unsettling. Terry, being the son of the hospital director, took it upon himself to reprimand the nurses in an unreasonable manner. "Move quicker. You're a nurse getting paid, aren't you? Don't slack off just because my father is lenient. Once I take over this hospital, I won't be so forgiving," he would bark at them. His harsh words towards the hardworking nurses were unreasonable and unjust. Attempting to intervene, I interjected, "Terry, don't you think that's too harsh? Everyone here is trying their best." Unfortunately, my husband didn't take kindly to my interference. In front of the other nurses, he flew into a rage, furious that I had dared to stand up to him. Since that incident, Terry became distant towards me, perhaps influenced by my mother-in-law, who had been insinuating from the start that I was too soft on your wife and that I was taking you for granted. Meanwhile, my father-in-law, though unable to openly oppose his wife, did what he could to protect me. Unfortunately, when my father-in-law fell seriously ill and became bedridden, the situation worsened. Seizing the opportunity, my mother-in-law made me take on all the household chores, treating me like a mere housekeeper. I found myself juggling caring for my son, cooking, laundry, and cleaning, all while enduring mistreatment. Even in front of my ailing father-in-law, my mother-in-law's cruelty knew no bounds. "Please don't speak to Lily that way," he would weakly protest, only to be met with her venomous retorts. Her abuse escalated, and I found myself being deprived of basic dignity. "Housekeepers don't eat with the family. Eat the leftovers later," she commanded, forcing me to subsist on scraps. Despite the hardships, I endured it all for the sake of my son and my ailing father-in-law. I was so distraught that I lost my appetite. When I glanced in the mirror, I was taken aback by the gaunt and worn reflection staring back at me. My husband's words cut deep. "I only married you because you were somewhat attractive, but I never imagined you become such a disheveled woman," he sneered, insisting that I relocate from our bedroom to the storage room. The cruelty was staggering. The verbal abuse didn't stop with me, it extended to our son. "Of course he's not smart. Look at who his mother is," my mother-in-law would scoff. "His constant crying is annoying. Make him stop right now," my husband demanded. It felt like something inside me had snapped. Determined to escape, my sole concern was my father-in-law's well-being. However, to my surprise, he urged me to flee to my brother's place. Pressing several $100 bills into my hand, he insisted I leave immediately. Without hesitation, I wrapped my son in my coat and hailed a taxi with the money my father-in-law had given me. I rushed to my grandfather's house, where I poured out the entire ordeal to him and my brother Derek. Derek, his usually calm demeanor replaced by a furious expression I had never seen before, clenched his fists in anger. Assuring me that things would be okay, he said, "You've been through so much. It's time to relax." Overwhelmed with emotion, I broke down in tears. Even my grandfather, typically reserved, muttered, "I can't forgive this." A few days later, leaving my son under my grandfather's care, I made the decision to return to my in-laws' house with Derek to retrieve my belongings. Having left abruptly without a word, I anticipated trouble upon our return. My husband greeted me with a cold gaze and muttered, "You finally returned, huh?" Derek, maintaining his composure, calmly stated, "My sister seems very distressed, so we'll be taking care of her for a while. We've come today to collect some of her personal belongings." To this, my husband retorted, "I married her, so if she doesn't come back, there will be no one to do the chores." That's a big problem for me. Looking down on Derek, my mother-in-law remarked, I heard you do pottery. It must be a tough life. Even if you take care of my daughter-in-law, it's going to be difficult for you, right? Please send her back. It's a problem for us too. I could see Derek struggling to contain his anger as we requested to retrieve our belongings. Directed to a storage room in the corner of the hallway, which served as my room, we found it cramped and neglected. Cardboard boxes and old appliances cluttered the space, with only a few changes of clothes for me and my son. There were no heating appliances, just a thin blanket and mattress. Derek, visibly shaken by the harsh conditions, confronted my mother-in-law. Is this where you've shoved my dear sister and her child? Her reply was callous. She should be grateful just to have a room. She's just a housekeeper after all. Eager to leave, yet concerned about my father-in-law, I wished to see him. He greeted me warmly and quietly handed me something, expressing his regret for not being able to protect me. For several days, we made preparations, and with my grandfather and Derek by my side, I returned to my in-laws' house. Determined to stand up for my son, I knew I couldn't keep running away forever. Upon arriving home, I handed my husband the divorce papers. His initial surprise quickly turned to defiance as he declared he wouldn't pay alimony or child support, claiming I had chosen to leave. To support my case, I played a recording in front of his mother, an audio documenting her belittling me and him shouting abuse. This is evidence of the abuse I suffered, I informed them. Their shock was palpable as they asked when I had even recorded this. It turned out my father-in-law had discreetly recorded everything to help me, passing the recording to me when I collected my belongings earlier. My brother Derek, who had graduated from law school and passed the bar exam while assisting our grandfather, assured me that I had grounds for divorce. He promised to fight for me wholeheartedly. As the tension escalated, my wheelchair-bound father-in-law appeared, handing divorce papers to my mother-in-law. He, too, had recorded the verbal abuse he endured and was now ready to divorce. Preferring life in a care facility over living with my mother-in-law, he asserted his decision firmly. My mother-in-law's reaction was unexpected. She laughed and declared her willingness to divorce as well, eager to return to her luxurious life. However, the situation took a dramatic turn when my grandfather made a call, announcing his termination of any contracts with a family like ours. It emerged that the major department store, run by my mother-in-law's brother, was on the brink of bankruptcy. He had been negotiating to exhibit and sell my grandfather's famous pottery, and the deal was close to finalization. However, a call from her brother, severing ties with her, left my mother-in-law stunned. Realizing the gravity of her situation, she began to plead for forgiveness, admitting her wrongdoing. At that moment, it became clear that change was inevitable. I have nowhere else to go. Please let me stay here, Lily. I'm sorry. Please forgive me, my mother-in-law pleaded tearfully. But forgiveness seemed out of reach for us. We all coldly stared at her, unmoved by her tears. Yet amidst the tension, my husband seemed oblivious to the gravity of the situation. I'm set to inherit this hospital. If you want a divorce, I'll pay alimony and child support. I'll marry someone younger and prettier than you, he said to me, his words laced with arrogance. However, my father-in-law interjected with a single sentence that changed everything. The hospital has been sold, he declared, his eyes widening in shock. What? My husband's face drained of color as my father-in-law revealed that Terry had been orchestrating behind the scenes. Get out of here right now, my father-in-law screamed at his stepson. My husband, not legally adopted by my father-in-law, had no claim to his assets. In contrast, I, legally adopted by my father-in-law, had been well cared for. Realizing the tide was turning against him, my husband quickly changed his tune, pleading for a fresh start with me, but I coldly dismissed him. Afterward, my son and I found solace and happiness at my grandparents' house. With each passing day, my son cried less, finding joy in playing outdoors. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings were finalized, the audio tape proving crucial in establishing my mother-in-law's fault. They now live in a small rented apartment, their attempts at finding new jobs faltering. On the other hand, my grandfather enjoys comfort in a high-end senior home, where we visit him often. Terry continues his passion for pottery under my grandfather's guidance. Remarkably, my brother found love at a pottery exhibition, dating a woman with a passion for pottery. As for me, I work as a nurse at a hospital near my grandfather's house, fulfilling my dream inspired by my mother's legacy.
You think you can just accuse me of cheating while I was away on business and demand a divorce? My husband, Jackson, bellowed through the phone. It should have been a jolting moment, but I knew better. This was just his attempt at stirring up drama. I already sold it. And you know what? I could practically feel his emotions quivering on the other end. Did he honestly believe I wouldn't see through his little charade? His naivety was almost comical. As his accusations continued to ricochet off my resolve, I found myself teetering between anger and amusement. Yet, amidst it all, a sense of empowerment began to emerge. This wasn't just a spat. This was a turning point. This was the moment I decided to take control. I chuckled inwardly at his feeble attempt to manipulate me. And then, as if the universe had aligned, a realization dawned on me. It was my turn to play. I'm Olivia, a 28-year-old working mom. Though I've held a steady job at a college store since I graduated from junior college at 20, Jackson's career trajectory has been less than stable. He's 2 years older, but when we first met 3 years ago, he was bouncing between jobs or sometimes doing nothing at all. He proposed to me hastily, but I set a condition. He needed to secure a stable job. I wasn't about to embark on a marriage without considering our future. Okay, but there's a condition, I asserted firmly, watching Jackson's expression shift to one of concern. What is it? He asked cautiously. You need to find a stable job. Otherwise, marriage is out of the question. We need to think about our future. He attempted to brush it off with a casual remark. Oh, don't worry, you're working, so there's no rush, right? But my parents would be concerned if I married without a job. I'll find one before we tie the knot, he promised, sensing the seriousness in my tone. Reluctantly, Jackson embarked on his job search journey. Eventually, he secured an office position at a construction company, and we moved forward with our plans to wed. At the time, I saw Jackson as somewhat careless with money and work, but I believed our partnership could balance each other out. I thought I could guide him towards financial responsibility, and he would complement my strengths. Little did I know, our challenges were just beginning. About a year into our marriage, as we were exploring the idea of buying a house, Jackson revealed a troubling obstacle. I might not qualify for a loan, he confessed casually. I was taken aback. What do you mean? I pressed for an explanation. He shrugged. Because I haven't been at my job long enough, I might need a guarantor for the loan. The only option would be my dad, but he's dealing with some serious gambling debts. He probably wouldn't be able to help. Why didn't you tell me this earlier? I was dumbfounded, especially with the contract and the real estate agent right in front of us. But Jackson, appearing unfazed, nonchalantly remarked, If we put the house in your name, it'll be fine, right? You've been at your job forever, so you can secure the loan. We'll both contribute to paying it off. It's just a formality. That's beside the point. Why didn't you bring this up before? This is significant for me too. I'm not even prepared with the paperwork, I retorted, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. Though he offered an apology, his contrition felt superficial, lacking sincerity. Despite my urge to protest further, faced with the already arranged contract and the presence of the agent, I decided against escalating the situation. Reluctantly, I hastily gathered the necessary documents, such as my income statement, for the loan application, and impulsively finalized the purchase under my name. Doubt not at me. Could I truly envision a future with this man? Perhaps I should have simply asserted, then we won't proceed, instead of hastily preparing the paperwork. My anxiety heightened with the looming issue of my in-laws. The other day, I had a conversation with Dad, Jackson began. He mentioned he might lose the house due to the debt I mentioned earlier, so he's considering moving in with us. Is that all right? What? Why would you even entertain that idea? I reacted swiftly, but Jackson merely shrugged it off. Well, he's facing difficulties. My brother is single, but he's working abroad. I'm the only one Dad can turn to. Shouldn't we seriously discuss this? Maybe he can stay temporarily until he finds a place, but committing to living with us permanently is a major decision. Jackson scowled. You just don't want him to stay, do you? If he moves in, we can divide the living expenses. You're always going on about money. You mean the money you never contribute? You promised we'd split the mortgage, but it's only coming out of my paycheck. You haven't given your share. In marriage, finances are shared. It's not just your money, it's ours. It's deducted from your account because the house is in your name. Stop being so self-centered, I exclaimed, frustration evident in my tone. But Jackson simply muttered, I hate discussing money, before storming out of the room. Such disputes became a regular occurrence. Every time, Jackson would brush off my concerns and eventually retreat. No resolution was ever reached. However, Jackson wasn't entirely inactive regarding his family's predicament. As part of his role in construction site administration, he frequently dealt with real estate contracts. He often consulted a specific agency on how to secure the best price for selling his family's home and the necessary procedures involved. I overheard these discussions repeatedly, finding solace in the fact that I wasn't alone in contemplating this matter. Yet the prospect of my in-laws moving in with us post-sale, as if it were a foregone conclusion, continued to unsettle me. Jackson began attending meetings with real estate agents and my in-laws without involving me, and he started spending more weekends away from home. Eventually, he embarked on a lengthy business trip lasting several months, necessitated by the distance of the construction site he was overseeing. It wasn't apparent to me then, but the seeds of our power struggle had already been sown. A few days after Jackson departed for his trip, I decided to treat myself to tea after a shopping excursion. Hello, the man who greeted me seemed familiar. Memories flooded back, recalling him as someone Jackson had once brought home. He worked at a real estate company, a young employee named Samuel, according to Jackson. Samuel had been with the company for less than a year. Ah, yes, I remember you. You visited our house before, right? Yes, I apologize for dropping by unannounced and even joining for a meal. My apologies. No need to worry. I should have been more welcoming. We ended up sharing tea together. Samuel was affable and appeared more level-headed than Jackson, despite his youth. As we conversed over tea, we found common ground and eventually bid each other farewell. At that moment, I couldn't fathom that this brief encounter would later be twisted into an accusation of infidelity. Yet that's precisely what happened when Jackson confronted me. You've been cheating on me while I was away, haven't you? We're getting a divorce. Give the house to my parents and leave. Immediately. Jackson's accusation hit me like a sledgehammer. In that moment, I couldn't help but wonder if the rumors were true. Jackson had evidently been spreading falsehoods, fabricating a narrative of my infidelity to justify his desire for divorce. And the bearer of this false tale was none other than Samuel, the man Jackson unjustly accused me of having an affair with. He showed up at my doorstep the day after our tea. I apologize for the sudden visit yesterday. Jackson asked me to reach out to you. Samuel confessed as he stood at my doorway. Shock and confusion washed over me, but I invited him inside, eager to hear his story. What he revealed left me stunned. Jackson had orchestrated a plan to frame me for infidelity, all in a bid to secure a divorce. Samuel was roped into fabricating evidence to support this scheme. There were two motives driving Jackson's deceitful agenda. Firstly, he coveted our house, fearing the potential loss of his parents-in-law's property. Jackson saw cohabiting with his parents as the easiest solution, but my resistance to the idea led him to devise a plan to oust me and claim the property. Secondly, Jackson was involved in an affair of his own, spending weekends with his mistress while pretending to discuss matters with my parents-in-law. His infatuation with her led him to view me, his wife, as an impediment. By framing me for infidelity, he hoped to secure both the house and compensation in the divorce settlement. Despite my perception of Jackson's lack of astuteness, his cunning nature in orchestrating such a devious plan was truly despicable. As I muttered my disdain, Samuel offered his apologies. However, I had no intention of aiding Jackson in his malicious scheme. I feigned cooperation, all the while plotting to turn the tables on him. Samuel, leveraging his expertise in real estate, offered various suggestions. Eventually, he proposed a daring move. You should sell the house while Jackson is away on his trip. And so, when Jackson returned, bewildered by the news of the sale, I delivered the final blow. I know everything, Jackson. Samuel recorded everything, including your attempt to frame me for cheating with him. If we proceed with divorce, I can claim alimony and take you to court, I declared, relishing the shock that registered on Jackson's face. Why? Why? He stammered, but I wasn't finished. I had one last card to play. You might not have realized, but Samuel isn't just any new employee. He's the son of the company's CEO. I emphasized, incredulous at Jackson's obliviousness. Didn't you notice Samuel shares the same last name as the CEO? How did that escape your notice? I pressed, my frustration mounting. Well, Samuel's last name isn't exactly uncommon, Jackson attempted to rationalize. Are you serious right now? I couldn't believe his lack of awareness. Yes, I'm serious, Jackson replied, his shock palpable. The realization dawned on him slowly. Samuel's company was one of Jackson's most crucial clients, and they had played a significant role in handling his family's property matters. If news of this deceit reached the CEO, Jackson would undoubtedly find himself in hot water. In fact, Samuel had likely already reported the situation. Look, fine, I'll check it out. But if you're lying, I'll figure it out. Jackson relented before abruptly ending the call. It didn't take long for him to realize the gravity of his actions. Subsequently, the real estate company owned by Samuel's father refused to engage in any business dealings with Jackson or offer him advice regarding his family property. With my house sold, Jackson had no option but to return to his family home following his business trip. Fortunately, Samuel had assisted me in finding an affordable apartment, so I encountered no difficulties. As I initiated the divorce proceedings, Jackson persisted in reaching out to me. I'm sorry, Olivia. Please forgive me, he pleaded. It's too late for apologies now. You tried to manipulate me using someone else. Why should I believe anything you say? I countered. Don't say that. After our divorce, you can be with that other woman, right? That's what you wanted, isn't it? He suggested, attempting to deflect blame. Yeah, she had someone else she liked and dumped me. What a sorry tale. But just because of that, don't expect me to change my mind and come running back to you. I muttered as I ended the call with a heavy sigh. Despite not disclosing my current address to him in hopes of keeping him at bay, Jackson's incessant calls persisted. Each time he pleaded, please don't leave me. I'll change. I'll be a better husband. Yet I was weary of his hollow promises. Once the divorce is finalized, I'll delete his number, block him on WhatsApp, and sever ties completely. To make matters worse, even my mother-in-law reached out, begging, please, Olivia, we'll be lost without you. It's not me you wanted, it's the house, right? But there's no house left, I reminded her. It wasn't just about the house. We're not that heartless. Come back, and you'll understand, she implored. You wanted the money, didn't you? I shot back, frustration seeping into my voice. That's not true. You're being unfair. You attempted to coerce me into living with you, and when I refused, Jackson resorted to deceit to gain leverage in the divorce. I can't trust someone who resorts to such tactics, I asserted firmly. It's obvious you're only interested in money. I continued to rebuff their pleas. Then my father-in-law called, his tone dripping with arrogance. Isn't it your duty as a daughter-in-law to assist my wife a little? Are you seriously refusing? Isn't all of this a consequence of the debts you've accumulated? I countered, my resolve unwavering. In response, his voice on the phone grew so loud that it hurt my ears. You heartless woman. Abandoning your mother-in-law in her time of need and shifting blame onto her. I'll teach you a lesson, you wicked woman. With that, I ended the call, shaken but determined. Armed with the recorded audio, I sought counsel from my lawyer. As it transpired, my father-in-law's words constituted a threat. Armed with this evidence, I informed Jackson that I'd pursue legal action if he didn't agree to the divorce. In a panic, Jackson reluctantly consented to the divorce. Finally, I was free from the clutches of that outrageous family. After the divorce, Jackson's reputation at work suffered, leading to a loss of trust and diminished responsibilities. Additionally, the unresolved debt forced him to sell his family home at a steep discount. Now, he resides in a modest apartment with his parents, grappling with a reduced salary and the burden of supporting his family. To compound his challenges, he is obligated to pay me alimony. Learning about Jackson's struggles firsthand from Samuel, who remained a confidant, I discovered an opportunity to leverage my customer service skills from my previous role at a clothing store. Samuel, now working in the HR department of a real estate company, recommended me for a position that required strong communication abilities. After careful consideration and discussions with Samuel, I accepted the offer and transitioned to the real estate company. Throughout this transition, Samuel and I maintained our close bond, which eventually blossomed into a romantic relationship. After a year of dating, we tied the knot, and I became the spouse of the future company president. Jackson likely never envisioned that the two individuals he attempted to falsely accuse of infidelity would ultimately find love and marry each other. Now surrounded by my supportive new family, including my in-laws, I look forward to building a beautiful life together with Samuel. My husband told me he lost his job, he said sadly. But hey, that might not be so bad. We can still turn things around. Just ignore that sneaky boss. We'll figure things out ourselves. I'm Sammy, by the way. The other day, I said yes, yes when the microwave beeped, and my daughter looked at me funny, saying, "Mom's talking to the microwave." It felt weird being caught off guard like that. But with gadgets like Alexa and Siri, talking to machines isn't unusual anymore. It was embarrassing because I didn't even realize I was doing it. But hey, compared to some of the really embarrassing moments I've had in the past, talking to the microwave isn't such a big deal. This happened about 15 years ago when I was working at a small but prestigious company. The company was known for its expertise in specialized tasks, like creating programs to keep computer systems safe. It had a good reputation with big companies, and its performance was solid. Back then, the internet wasn't as common as it is now, so there was a lot of potential for growth, especially in areas like security. People expected the company to keep doing well. During this time, I met Simon, who is now my husband. He was a colleague, and we eventually got married. But even before we tied the knot, I had to deal with unwanted attention from the company's president. I've always been seen as attractive, even from a young age, and I'd often got noticed by photographers for magazines when I was out and about. Unfortunately, that also meant I attracted the wrong kind of attention from some men, including the president. Because of that, I've never really liked my own looks. Even a simple good morning from me would be exaggerated by the president, who would say things like, "You're such a good girl," always greeting me with a smile. He'd brag about it to others in the company. The president was 48 years old at the time, bald, with what little hair he had left slicked down on his forehead. But he seemed content with his appearance and didn't seem bothered about fixing it. He wasn't very nice, and he treated employees he didn't like with arrogance, while being friendly to those who were useful to the company or those he found attractive. He had a bossy way about him, which created divisions among the staff. Whether it was good or bad, his behavior made me feel uncomfortable. But since he was my boss, I had to find a way to get along with him. Dealing with a man who wrongly believed I was dependent on him because I reported to him for work was tricky. I tried to avoid getting too close to him to avoid any misunderstandings. However, when I announced my marriage to my husband, the president began persistently asking me out for meals. Even though we kept our relationship at work secret, people who knew about us knew. But the fact that the president increased his invitations at this time showed he hadn't realized I was married until then. It was just things like feeling his eyes on me or hearing from others that he liked me. I initially tried to handle it gracefully, but it became a problem when his invitations got more intense. He suggested going to fancy restaurants, drinking expensive wine he bought, and even going to bars with private rooms. He kept asking when I would go out with him alone, making things awkward and uncomfortable for me. Even after I kept saying no to his invitations, the president didn't stop. He thought I was playing hard to get and teasing him on purpose, calling me names like Little Devil. His invitations were so obvious, he just wanted to get me drunk and take advantage of me in private. It was clear it had nothing to do with work. If he suggested going to a busy park near a police station and asked me to drink water while licking salt, which I hated, I might have considered it as a work obligation, but ultimately, I wouldn't have gone. One day, I couldn't take it anymore. I told him straight out to leave me alone because it was bothering me. I had avoided saying this before because I didn't want him to realize I knew about his interest in me, which would complicate things even more. But that day, I was too stressed, and my true feelings slipped out. As expected, the president just laughed and tried to touch me. He said I knew all along and was teasing him on purpose. His touch made my skin crawl, and without thinking, I pushed him away and ran off. Originally, my husband was concerned about the president's behavior and suggested I quit my job. But I insisted on staying because I wanted to support my husband, who was the top technician in the company. He's working on a new system that could greatly improve our company's performance, and I wanted to be there to see it through. Switching companies after quitting wouldn't have made sense for me, so despite the uncomfortable situation with the president, I chose to stay. However, it was time to put an end to it. The next day, I handed in my resignation letter, addressing it to the president. I had already discussed everything with my husband the night before, and he strongly encouraged me to resign. So with determination, I confronted the president, but he didn't accept it. Instead, he tried to convince me to stay by offering higher pay and a better position. He even made weird suggestions like promoting me to be the president's wife, which made me uneasy. I told him I was married and tired of his advances, but he seemed to twist my words, implying that I secretly loved him. It was frustrating. I never saw him that way. I thought maybe he felt threatened by my husband and was trying to keep me close, but that conversation just made me more determined to leave. The president accepted my resignation, saying I shouldn't have to work as just an ordinary employee when I'm going to be the future president's wife. He took my letter and left the office. It was clear he didn't understand anything. Blaming my husband made no sense. But wait, isn't this unexpectedly lucky for both me and my husband? Just married, and now I'm out of a job. When my husband asked what was wrong, I smiled and said, "Well then, congratulations." I suggested to my husband that since he was developing a system to find suitable customers for the company, and without him, the data wouldn't be updated, maybe it was a good opportunity for us to start our own business. He was surprised at first, but then laughed and agreed, saying I was clever. We could work together again. After getting fired, my husband wasted no time. Within 30 days, just like the president said, we used our savings to start our own business. During this time, my husband reached out to the talented people from our old company, basically recruiting them to join us. The bald president, who didn't even know how to use a computer, often didn't understand the struggles we faced and would give us impossible tasks. So when my husband asked them to join our company where they'd be understood and valued, almost everyone agreed, except for the higher-ups the president favored. If I had stayed at the old company, I might have been stuck there too. Following my husband's lead, he developed a new and improved version of the system he'd been working on before. With his connections, he not only secured jobs, but also created 2 new security systems, selling them to other companies. In an industry with few competitors, companies naturally wanted the best products, so our workload quickly grew. Within 4 years, our company became the best in the business. Everyone at our company was thrilled with our success. Then, out of nowhere, the president showed up at our office one day. Reluctantly, my husband led him to his workspace, which also served as the president's office. Worried, I went along too. My husband asked the president what he wanted, and the president immediately bowed and apologized with tears in his eyes. He said he'd been watching us for the past few years and realized that I really didn't like him. He genuinely regretted his actions. The president explained that the previous company was in financial trouble, short-staffed, and making employees work long hours without paying them properly for overtime. At this point, I didn't really care about getting an apology. My husband is making more money now than he did at the old company, and he's increased the salaries of our employees. We're happy with where we are now, so the president's apology didn't matter to me. It felt like a waste of time. When my husband asked if the president had anything else to say, the president got off the sofa, sat on the floor, and begged. He pleaded for my husband to come back to the old company, saying that with him there, things would improve. But my husband calmly refused. He said that ever since he got fired, he's no longer an employee there and has a responsibility to protect the people at our own company, so he couldn't go back. The president kept pleading, even offering to step down and have his company merge with ours. But my husband said no. He explained that what the president did to me in the past was wrong and hurtful to female employees' morale. Nowadays, overworking is criticized, and actions like the president's are considered unacceptable. Back then, it might have been seen differently, but now it's clear it was wrong. He mentioned how victims were often silenced or blamed, and he couldn't forgive the president for what he did. The situation with overtime was different. Until then, it was common for companies to ignore labor laws and make employees work long hours. But as laws changed and people started seeing long hours as harmful, the president's actions could have serious consequences if reported. At first, he begged not to resign, but he eventually realized he couldn't stay as the head of the company. The president stepped down, and my husband took over, merging his company with ours. All the employees came with us, and we sorted out the unpaid overtime. Since our company was doing well, it was a relief. The president's company didn't pay much for overtime anyway, so the amount owed wasn't huge. We came out on top. When you suggested starting a business after I lost my job, I never imagined we'd grow so much that we'd surpass the president's company. I'd always believed in your abilities. Really? Or are you just trying to boost my ego? I teased my husband. No way. You caught me, he replied with a smile. As we talked about our journey as a couple, I felt genuinely relieved that everything had worked out so well. Later, it came out that someone leaked the conversations for the president's office, including his embarrassing actions towards me. This, along with the issue of unpaid overtime, made it to the local newspapers. It didn't make it to TV news because it's a small company, but more people read local papers than watch TV or read famous magazines. The president became a laughingstock in the community, and kids started playing a game called Playing President, where they pretended to flirt with a reluctant girl. It was embarrassing for him, and if he saw it, he'd probably feel even worse. He was divorced and had a teenage daughter. When she heard about the game, she seemed upset and ran home. Having a creepy father must be tough for a sensitive girl like her. It's like he's facing consequences for his own actions. Now, the president lost his company and his daughter, and he can't get a good job because he doesn't know how to use a computer. He's working as an office worker in a local factory, but he struggles with basic tasks. He's even serving tea to the female president there. It's quite a fall from his previous position. He used to order female tea servers around, but now he's the one serving tea. He probably never imagined he'd end up like this. The employees who joined our company from the president's old one find his downfall pretty amusing. They're not feeling sorry for him at all. Meanwhile, my husband and I have been blessed with 2 children. Our daughter is quite the chatterbox and loves teasing me when I get distracted during phone calls or talk to the microwave. She's cheeky but adorable. Our son, who's a year younger, seems to have a knack for computers like his dad. Even at his young age, he's already dabbling in creating small programs, so we think he has a bright future ahead of him. It would be great if he eventually took over the company, but right now, he's more interested in being a YouTuber. working for Uber Eats, or delivering pizzas. Wait, son, aren't there any other options? I often ask him. Despite the chaos of parenting, we cherish our happy family moments every day. So, how did you like our story? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more updates. See you in the next video.
15 years ago, I ended my marriage because I found out my husband was cheating with a childhood friend and even had a child with her. This made me very upset and almost made me quit my job. But during that tough time, my current husband helped me and we made a happy home together. However, my happiness didn't last long. Recently, I saw my ex-husband for the first time in 15 years. He said mean things to me, like I must still be single because nobody would want to marry someone like me who couldn't have kids, but I surprised him by introducing him to my children. When I introduced my son, my ex-husband was shocked and scared. I told him about my life now. I'm Florence, 38 years old. I live with my 13-year-old son Max, my 11-year-old daughter Ava, and my husband David, who is the same age as me. Max is in middle school and going through a rebellious phase. He can be cheeky sometimes, but my husband David knows how to handle him. Ava loves makeup and fashion, and she knows how to get what she wants because she's the youngest and a girl. Max really cares about Ava, so when she jokes about not liking him if he's not nice to me, he quickly apologizes and promises to be good. He's charming and always knows how to make things fun. So, even though my life is busy, it's also full of joy. But there's something people might not know about me. I've been divorced once and am now happily married for the second time. I got divorced because my ex-husband, who I'll call Jack, did something really hurtful. It happened 15 years ago when we were both in college. We were happy together at first, talking about how much we wanted kids and imagining what it would be like to be parents. But even after trying for a while, we didn't get pregnant. Every month, when my period came, it caused tension between us. We tried to figure out why we couldn't have kids, spending a lot of money on treatments, but doctors couldn't find anything wrong. Despite this, my husband started getting frustrated and blaming me for our infertility. He'd say things like, "When will I ever become a father?" and make sarcastic comments that made me feel bad. He stopped helping around the house, saying it was my job because I couldn't have kids. He made me feel like our marriage was pointless because I couldn't fulfill my role as a woman. Afterwards, my husband's words got meaner. He'd say things like, "My sister's having her second baby already. Isn't that great? They're on their second, and we haven't even had our first." He'd look at me with a harsh expression, making fun of me and putting me down. He'd say, "If your body was normal, we have kids by now." I'd try to defend myself, saying we didn't know the reason for our infertility yet, but he'd just say, "It's always the woman's fault for not having babies. If I knew you couldn't have kids, I wouldn't have married you. You should feel guilty." His words hurt me a lot. On top of that, my in-laws would call, excitedly asking when they get a grandchild. At first, I tried to brush it off, saying it takes time, but it didn't help. My mother-in-law started blaming me, saying I was useless for not having kids yet, especially since my sister-in-law had kids so easily. The pressure from them was overwhelming. One day, my friend Daisy invited me out. Jack, my ex-husband, had been busy with work, so he wasn't around much. That's when Daisy told me something shocking. She said, "I've been wanting to talk to you for a while. I have something important to tell you, Florence. I've missed you too." "What's up, Daisy?" "Remember Grace? She was Jack's childhood friend. They grew up near each other and their families were close. She went to the same college as us and now works with me. Grace, the daughter of the CEO at my job, got her position through family connections. We didn't really hang out in college since we were in different groups, and even at work, we didn't talk much because we worked in different departments. My husband introduced me to her once, calling her his friend and asking me to get along with her. But Grace didn't seem to like me, so I avoided her. Daisy, my friend, told me something surprising about Grace. She said, "I think your husband and Grace are having an affair." I couldn't believe it. Daisy had seen them holding hands, not just like friends. "Are you sure?" I asked. "I think you should find out more," Daisy said, offering to help me talk about it. I had suspected Jack was cheating. He'd always come home late, saying he had to work more. He was never around on weekends, busy entertaining clients. Even though I had a feeling, I tried to ignore it. But after hearing Daisy's warning, I went straight to a detective agency. I wanted proof of his infidelity. Within a week, they had enough evidence, but I wasn't ready to divorce him yet. Despite everything, I still remembered the promises we made to each other. I needed time to decide. A few days later, I got home to find Jack sitting at the dinner table, which was unusual because he usually came home late. "Oh, you're home. I thought you'd be late again," I said sarcastically. "Yeah, sorry about that. I need to talk to you," he replied. Knowing about the affair, I braced myself for bad news. "I want a divorce," he said. "What?" I was shocked. I realized he wasn't just fooling around, he was serious about Grace. "Grace is pregnant. I'm going to marry her," he added. I couldn't believe it. He had always said Grace was just a friend. Jack didn't seem to think he did anything wrong. He even said, "My mom wants me to divorce you. She thinks Grace is better because she's prettier and can have kids." Hearing this hurt a lot. Tears filled my eyes as Jack left, saying he was going back to Grace. I was too hurt to stop him. Later, I got divorce papers in the mail, with a note from Grace asking me to divorce Jack. It felt like a slap in the face. I wanted to say, "No, you're the one who took my husband." But I realized arguing wouldn't change anything. I was left with so many questions. Why was I being blamed? I couldn't just accept the divorce quietly. Determined to stand up for myself, I used the evidence I gathered from the detective agency to start divorce mediation. A few days after filing, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, I heard Grace, Jack's mistress, yelling at me. She was furious that I had started a lawsuit. I calmly explained that it was the right thing to do given the situation and that I knew about her inappropriate behavior. She demanded compensation, even though she was pregnant. Her harsh words hurt me deeply. I told her we could discuss everything officially during the divorce mediation. In the mediation, the court recognized Jack and Lee's relationship as infidelity based on the evidence. Jack tried to blame my infertility. The court didn't buy it because there was no proof of my infertility within just a year of marriage. In the end, I received $220,000 as alimony from Jack and $110,000 from Grace. After finalizing the divorce, I hoped to move on, but the aftermath was far from over. The affair between Jack, Grace, and me became gossip among our friends, especially since we all went to the same university. Shockingly, some rumors suggested I hid my infertility and tricked Jack into marrying me. Some friends even sympathized with Jack and Grace, which felt awful. The situation got worse at work because Lee, Grace's father, was my company's president. Grace portrayed herself as a victim, spreading lies about me hiding my infertility and demanding alimony while she was pregnant. Despite trying to ignore it, I faced backlash at work. My bosses favored Grace because of her influential family, and I was sidelined from important projects. Eventually, I felt forced to resign. While job hunting, another company recognized my skills and offered me a position. Here, I thrived beyond expectations. My new boss valued me for my abilities, unlike my previous workplace, which favored nepotism. I found myself drawn to this boss, who turned out to be my current husband, David. David was my rock during the tough times after my breakup with Jack. We spent a lot of time together, talking about everything from work to personal matters, and our bond grew into love. When David proposed, I was thrilled, but I was also scared of facing infertility again. I confessed this fear to him, and he reassured me, saying that he loved me no matter what and that having children wasn't the most important thing to him. Feeling truly happy and loved, I decided to marry David. Shortly after our wedding, we were blessed with our first child, Max, followed by our daughter, Aita. Despite the challenges of parenting, we were content and happy every day. Years later, at a friend's wedding, I unexpectedly saw my ex-husband for the first time in 15 years. I was startled to see him there, but then I remembered that the bride and groom were also our university friends, so it wasn't surprising that he was there too. I tried to ignore him as I walked by, but he called out to me loudly, catching my attention. "Hey, what's up?" Jack said loudly, possibly drunk, as he spoke to me. "Surprised to see you here, it's been a while. Looks like you've put on some weight, huh?" he added, spraying a bit as he talked. I silently rolled my eyes at his sarcastic comment. Then Jack called over his family, including Grace and her son. Grace laughed when she saw me and joked, "Wow, it's been ages. Have you been stress eating? You've gained some weight, huh? Life's been a roller coaster, hasn't it? And still no luck with having kids, right? Tough luck, huh?" Their rude comments left me speechless with shock. Then I noticed Grace's son blushing and looking down with embarrassment. He was quite handsome. I realized I hadn't introduced him yet. "This is my son," Grace proudly announced. "He's cute, right? Takes after me. And he's not just good looking, he's really smart too, a little genius." "Looks like we're the only ones happy here, huh?" Jack and Grace laughed, proudly showing off their son. But I noticed something off about their son's expression. He seemed uncomfortable with his parents' behavior, growing increasingly dissatisfied with their mocking attitude. He must be a kind-hearted child, I thought to myself. But I didn't have time for them. Just as I was about to leave, Jack grabbed my arm tightly. "You divorced me because of infertility, yet you took money from us," he said, still holding on to a grudge from 15 years ago. Then Grace chimed in, "Yeah, you're infertile and single. Why do you need money? Families like us with children need it more. Give us back double the money you took." Their selfishness stunned me. Suddenly, Jack's son spoke up, pointing out, "Single means unmarried, right? But she's wearing a wedding ring on her left hand." Everyone's attention turned to my left hand, where I wore a wedding ring. Jack and Grace stared in shock. "You're married?" they exclaimed loudly, causing a scene. Feeling embarrassed by the scene Jack and Grace caused, I was unsure what to do. Suddenly, my son Max and daughter Ava appeared, concerned about my lateness. Ava, always outspoken, was joined by Max, who rarely spoke up so boldly. "Mom, you're late, and you have kids?" Max asked, surprising me with his directness. "Yes, I do. Let me introduce them. This is my son Max and my daughter Ava." Jack and Grace were shocked to see the children of the woman they thought couldn't have kids. Grace looked closely at my son, and after a moment, they began to speak in a more mature tone, though their voices sounded strained. They seemed curious about Max's uniform. "He came straight from school with my husband, so he's still in his uniform. And yes, he goes to that famous private middle school," I explained. "Max worked hard and wanted to try for it, so we let him take the exam. He passed and has been attending since this year." Indeed, Max excelled academically and was enrolled in a prestigious local school. "No way, he can't be your son," my daughter exclaimed, joining the conversation. "She plans to take the same school's exam next year," I added proudly. "Yeah, and Max is amazing. He won a violin contest," Ava chimed in. "Violin? I thought I recognized him. He was on TV recently," Grace exclaimed. "Oh, you saw that?" "Yes, he's been getting quite a bit of media attention lately. He was coming back from violin practice today," I explained. Grace and my ex-husband were speechless. "You were supposed to be infertile. How could you have children like this?" Jack protested. "We're all happy now, and that's what matters. Let's not involve each other anymore," I said firmly, ready to leave with my kids. Just then, my husband David arrived. Jack's face went pale at the sight of him. "Is your husband by any chance the young Mr. Lopes who became the president of Resident last year?" Jack asked, recognizing David. Indeed, David was the president of a company that had ties with Grace's father's firm. I had switched jobs and met David there. Last year, he was appointed as the president of the company, recommended by the then president. "Ah, I'm Lopez," my husband introduced himself, confused by the tense atmosphere. Sensing the tension, Max explained, "We heard these people calling Mom infertile and fat, so Ava and I came to help her out." I realized they must have overheard my ex-husband and his wife insulting me earlier. My husband's expression hardened as he realized the situation. "I heard rumors, but I didn't expect a lack of decency," he said firmly. Jack started making excuses, trying to flatter my husband, while Grace protested. They began arguing, and their son, who had been silent, finally spoke up. "Let's stop this already. It's terrible how you're talking about this lady, calling her fat and infertile, and demanding money back. It's embarrassing for me," he said tearfully. "And what's this about an affair? Am I a child born from an affair? Am I an unwanted child?" he continued, his voice full of anguish. Jack and Grace became visibly unsettled. "Oh well, it's not like that." Grace tried to defend herself, but she couldn't ignore the stares from the other guests. Blushing deeply, she looked down in embarrassment. Though I couldn't forgive Jack and Grace, I admired their son for his sense of justice and kindness. Wanting to support him, I was about to speak, but my husband spoke up first. "Thank you for standing up for my wife and defending her from insults. You're a kind child, my husband said, patting the boy's head. With a smile, I decided to speak up too. But maybe I am a bit chubby. However, that's not the point. Actually, I'm pregnant, I announced, gently stroking my belly. I was already pregnant with our third child. At that time, I was on maternity leave. Turning to the tear-filled eyes of the boy, I continued, your mom also nurtured you in her belly with great care. You're not an unwanted child. Your mom and dad love you and are proud of you, right? Looking at Jack and Grace, I waited for their response. The boy looked at them hopefully and asked, really? Jack and Grace quickly nodded, assuring him, yes, yes. You're our pride. You're very important to us. Seeing the boy smile, I felt a sense of relief. Let's get back to our seats for now. It's a day of celebration, I suggested. Each family returned to their seats and the chaotic scene came to an end. The wedding concluded successfully, and as we headed to the station, Grace and Jack approached us with their son, holding hands. Max and Ava had been protective of me, but my husband chuckled and calmed them down. Grace and Jack offered their apologies. Sorry about everything. We truly regret our actions today. Thank you for earlier, they said. It was the first apology I had received from them in 15 years. Perhaps having a child had changed them a bit. I just laughed and said, really? After all this time? With that, I turned my back on them and began to walk away. Max offered to carry my bags, taking the one marked with maternity. Ava cheerfully dragged a coat over my shoulders. Despite their young age, they were looking out for me during my pregnancy. All right, tonight's dinner will be Dad's homemade hamburgers, Max and Ava's favorite. Thank you. I vowed to protect the smiles of my beloved family, leaving behind the pains of the past.